Do you ever think about those everyday realities of growing up poor in the 1980s, the ones that shaped how you saw the world before you even understood what money meant? These memories sat quietly in kitchens, closets, and lunchboxes, telling stories no one had to explain. So what do you still carry from those days? Generic brand groceries in plain white packaging were impossible to ignore, sitting on pantry shelves like silent announcements of how tight things really were. In the 1980s, these no-frills products lined the cabinets of families who learned early that taste mattered less than price. The cans had no colorful labels, no friendly mascots, just bold black letters spelling out exactly what was inside: corn, beans, soup, nothing else. Kids learned not to bring snacks to school because pulling out a plain white bag invited questions no one wanted to answer. Parents stacked these products carefully, grateful for the savings but aware of what the packaging said without saying it. The cereal boxes were the worst because every morning started with a reminder that name brands belonged to other families. There was no prize inside, no cartoon character smiling from the front, just flakes that tasted close enough to keep everyone fed. Those plain white labels taught lessons about pride, silence, and survival that stayed with people long after the groceries were gone. It was never just about food. It was about understanding, very young, that the world noticed what your family could afford. Government cheese from the surplus program showed up in kitchens like a quiet confession that times were harder than anyone wanted to admit. That thick orange block came wrapped in plain packaging and weighed more than any store-bought cheese ever did. Families sliced it for sandwiches, melted it over noodles, and grated it onto whatever else needed flavor, stretching it as far as it could possibly go. The taste was unmistakable, rich, and almost too salty, the kind of flavor that stuck with you whether you wanted it to or not. Kids grew up thinking all cheese tasted like that until they visited a friend's house and realized the difference. Lines at distribution centers wound around buildings, filled with parents clutching vouchers and hoping no one from the neighborhood noticed them waiting. It was survival wrapped in government paper, something given freely, but never without a cost to pride. People made jokes about it years later, turning the memory into something lighter than it actually felt at the time. But the truth was that block of cheese fed families when nothing else could, and no amount of humor ever really erased what it meant to need it. Powdered milk mixed from a box sat in kitchen cabinets across the country, waiting to be stirred into cold water and poured over cereal like the real thing. In the 1980s, families who watched every penny knew this dusty white powder well, scooping it carefully and whisking it into pitchers that never quite looked right. The taste was thin, slightly chalky, and unmistakably different from the fresh milk other kids drank without thinking. No matter how long you chilled it or how hard you stirred, something about powdered milk always gave itself away. Children learned to drink it fast, gulping it down before the flavor had time to settle on the tongue. Parents promised it was the same, just cheaper, but everyone knew the difference even if no one said it out loud. Some families mixed it half and half with real milk to stretch the budget further, creating a compromise that fooled no one but cost a little less. That powdered milk taught kids early that substitutes were part of life, and that wanting something better did not mean you would get it. The memory of that thin white liquid stayed with people for decades, long after they could finally afford the real thing. Bread bags worn over shoes in winter were a survival trick passed down quietly from parent to child in households where new boots were simply not an option. In the 1980s, kids pulled plastic bags over their socks before sliding into worn-out sneakers, hoping the thin layer would keep the wet and cold from soaking through. The bags crinkled with every step, making a sound that felt impossibly loud on the walk to school, as if the whole world could hear your family's budget in each footfall. Snow seeped through holes anyway, but the bread bags bought a little time before the chill set in completely. Parents tied them tight around ankles, tucking the edges into pant legs to hide the makeshift waterproofing from anyone who might look too closely. It was embarrassing and necessary all at once, the kind of solution that made perfect sense at home, but felt unbearable in public. Other kids never seemed to have plastic bags peeking out from their boots, and that difference spoke louder than words ever could. Those crinkled bags became a quiet symbol of what families did to keep going when the money ran out and winter refused to wait. Hand-me-down clothes from older siblings or neighbors filled closets and dressers in homes where buying new was a luxury reserved for rare occasions. In the 1980s, children wore jeans with patched knees, shirts with faded logos, and jackets that had already survived 3 or 4 other kids before landing in their hands. Nothing fit perfectly because nothing was chosen with your body in mind. Sleeves hung too long or too short, waistbands needed belts to stay up, and colors had long since lost their original brightness. Kids learned to stop asking for new things because the answer was always the same. Wait for your cousin to outgrow something, then it will be yours. The clothes carried history in every stain and stretched seam, stories from lives you did not live but now wore against your skin. Some hand-me-downs came from church donation bins, folded neatly into bags that parents carried home without saying where they came from. It was not charity to them. It was practicality, survival, and making do with whatever showed up. Those borrowed clothes taught kids that identity was not something you wore. It was something you carried inside, no matter what covered the outside. Rabbit ear antennas wrapped in aluminum foil became a familiar sight on televisions in homes where cable was an impossible expense. In the 1980s, families adjusted those thin metal rods constantly, searching for the magic angle that would turn static into something watchable. Kids stood beside the television holding the antenna, acting as human signal boosters while someone shouted directions from the couch. A little to the left. Now up. No. Back where it was. The foil was supposed to help. Crinkled sheets wrapped around the tips like silver flags promising better reception. Sometimes it worked for a few minutes before the picture dissolved into snow again. Entire evenings revolved around chasing a clear signal, twisting and tilting until everyone gave up and watched through the fuzz anyway. The antenna became a family project, a shared frustration, and eventually a running joke that carried into adulthood. But underneath the laughter was the truth that cable cost money no one had, and rabbit ears were the only bridge to the outside world. Those foil-wrapped antennas were never just about television. They were about making do when the world offered better to everyone else. Layaway plans at department stores were the only way many families managed to afford Christmas gifts, school clothes, or anything that cost more than a week's groceries. In the 1980s, parents walked into stores with a list, picking out items they could not take home yet, but could slowly pay off over weeks or months. The clerk wrote everything down, tagged the merchandise, and tucked it into a back room where it waited until the final payment cleared. Kids sometimes saw their gifts being carried to layaway, wrapped in mystery and patience, knowing they existed but unable to touch them yet. Every paycheck, parents returned to chip away at the balance, watching the total shrink while hoping nothing unexpected wiped out the progress. Missing a payment meant losing everything, so families sacrificed small pleasures to keep those layaway slips current. When pickup day finally arrived, it felt like a victory. Arms full of bags that represented months of quiet discipline and careful saving. That system taught children something profound about delayed gratification, about wanting something and working toward it $1 at a time. Layaway was hope with a payment plan attached. Using the oven for heat when the furnace broke was a dangerous but common survival trick during brutal winter months in the 1980s. Families turned the dial to 400 degrees, cracked the oven door open, and huddled around the warm glow radiating from the kitchen into rooms that had grown impossibly cold. Parents knew it was risky, but the alternative was watching children shiver through another night without heat. The gas bill was already unpaid, the furnace repair too expensive to consider, and the landlord impossible to reach when problems arose. So the oven became the hearth, the kitchen became the living room, and blankets became armor against the chill that crept through walls and windows. Kids did homework at the kitchen table just to stay near the warmth, their breath still visible in the far corners of the house. No one talked about it outside the family because admitting you heated your home with an oven invited judgment no one needed. It was survival dressed in silence, a solution born of desperation that somehow got families through one more winter. The memory of that open oven door stays with people, a reminder of how close to the edge things actually were. Kool-Aid, instead of real juice, showed up at every meal in homes where stretching the grocery budget meant choosing powder over bottles. In the 1980s, That brightly colored drink mix cost almost nothing, and a single packet could fill an entire pitcher when stirred with tap water and enough sugar to mask the artificial taste. Kids drank it red, purple, orange, and every other color offered, never realizing that juice from actual fruit was something other families poured without thinking. The powder-stained lips, tongues, and the plastic pitchers that held it, leaving rings of color that no amount of scrubbing could remove. Parents mixed it strong or weak depending on how much was left in the cupboard, sometimes watering it down so far that the flavor barely registered. It was refreshing enough on hot days and sweet enough to feel like a treat, even when it was not. Birthday parties served it proudly, and summer afternoons ended with sticky faces and empty glasses. Kool-Aid was never a choice in those homes. It was what existed when money dictated everything. That powdered drink taught kids that what you could afford shaped what you consumed, and wanting better did not change the facts. Bologna sandwiches for lunch every single day became the reliable constant in lunchboxes carried by kids who knew the budget left no room for variety. In the 1980s, that pink processed meat was cheap, available everywhere, and filling enough to get through an afternoon of classes without hunger creeping in. Parents slapped a slice or two onto white bread, maybe added a smear of mustard or mayonnaise if the jar was not empty, and wrapped it in whatever was handy. There was no turkey, no roast beef, no deli counter selections carefully weighed and priced. There was bologna, and it was enough because it had to be. Kids traded lunches sometimes, offering their sandwiches in hopes of tasting something different, but the trades rarely worked in their favor. The smell of bologna drifted out every time the lunchbox opened, familiar and faintly embarrassing in cafeterias where other kids unwrapped sandwiches from a different world. But that simple sandwich kept stomachs full and families afloat during years when every dollar mattered. It was never gourmet, never exciting, never first choice. It was survival between two slices of bread, carried to school and eaten quietly. Cereal eaten with water when the milk ran out was a quiet breakfast compromise nobody talked about outside the house. In the 1980s, kids woke up hungry and found nothing in the refrigerator but an empty carton pushed to the back of the shelf. So they poured tap water over their flakes or puffs and ate quickly, hoping the cereal would stay crunchy long enough to finish. The taste was thin, almost hollow, nothing like the creamy richness that other kids described at school. Parents apologized without words, setting the bowl down with tight lips and turning away before anyone could see their face. Some mornings the water was cold, other mornings it came from the tap still warm, and neither option made the cereal taste any better. It was not starvation, but it was close enough to feel the edge of something uncomfortable. Kids learned not to complain because complaining changed nothing and only made parents feel worse. That watery cereal taught lessons about silence, gratitude, and the gap between what you wanted and what you had. Years later, adults who grew up this way still remember the sound of water hitting dry cereal, a memory that never fades no matter how full the refrigerator becomes. Sharing a bed with 2 or 3 siblings was the nightly reality in homes where space and money both ran short. In the 1980s, kids learned to sleep curled tight, elbows tucked in, legs folded to avoid kicking whoever was next to them. The mattress sagged in the middle where too many bodies pressed down night after night, and blankets never seemed to stretch far enough to cover everyone equally. Arguments broke out over who got the wall side, who hogged the pillow, and who kept stealing the covers in the middle of the night. But there was warmth too, the kind that came from knowing someone was always close, even when everything else felt uncertain. Siblings whispered secrets in the dark, made up stories to pass the time, and eventually drifted off tangled together like a pile of puppies. Parents did what they could, sometimes rotating who slept where, sometimes adding an extra blanket when winter made the room unbearable. Those crowded beds built bonds that lasted far beyond childhood, forged in discomfort and closeness that most people never experience. It was not ideal, but it was home, and the memory of those cramped nights still carries a strange kind of tenderness. Homemade Halloween costumes from whatever was around became an annual test of creativity in homes where store-bought outfits were out of the question. In the 1980s, Kids dug through closets, attics, and donation bags looking for anything that could transform into something spooky, silly, or strange. Old sheets became ghosts with uneven eye holes. Cardboard boxes turned into robots held together with tape and hope. Face paint came from leftover makeup or markers that washed off eventually. Parents stayed up late cutting, sewing, and gluing, determined to send their children into the neighborhood looking like they belonged alongside kids in plastic masks and shiny capes. The results were never perfect, but they were always unique, costumes no one else could possibly have because no one else owned the same random pile of junk. Some years the costumes fell apart before trick-or-treating ended, leaving kids to explain what they were supposed to be while holding pieces together. But those handmade disguises carried something store-bought ones never could: proof that someone cared enough to try. That effort stayed with kids long after the candy was gone and the costumes were thrown away. Food stamps carefully counted at the grocery store became a weekly ritual that came with whispers and sideways glances from strangers in line. In the 1980s, parents sorted through those small paper coupons before reaching the register, making sure they had exactly enough to cover what sat in the cart. Kids learned to stand quietly, pretending not to notice the looks from cashiers or the comments muttered just loud enough to hear. The stamps announced your situation to everyone nearby, turning a simple grocery trip into something uncomfortably public. Parents moved quickly, loading bags and counting change, eager to finish before the stares became unbearable. Some stores had separate lines for food stamp users, which only made the division more obvious. Kids carried that feeling into adulthood, the memory of standing beside a parent who was doing everything possible to keep the family fed while strangers judged from a few feet away. Those paper stamps taught lessons about dignity, shame, and how the world sometimes made survival feel like something to apologize for. The grocery store became a place where poverty was impossible to hide, no matter how hard anyone tried. One rotary phone attached to the kitchen wall was the only connection to the outside world, shared by everyone in the house whether they liked it or not. In the 1980s, that heavy beige or olive green device hung in the same spot year after year, its coiled cord stretched and tangled from countless conversations held while pacing the linoleum floor. Making a call meant standing where everyone could hear, spinning the dial slowly and waiting for it to click back before entering the next number. Privacy did not exist because the phone belonged to the family, not to any single person. Kids begged for a few minutes to talk to friends while parents reminded them that long distance cost money no one had. The ring was loud and impossible to ignore, echoing through the house like an alarm that demanded immediate attention. Missing a call meant missing it completely because there was no machine to catch the message. That single phone taught patience, sharing, and the value of every connection made through those spinning numbers. It was a lifeline, a frustration, and a fixture that defined how families communicated before the world moved on without it. Haircuts given at home with kitchen scissors left crooked bangs and uneven lines that marked every school photo for years to come. In the 1980s, parents draped towels over small shoulders, pulled out the sharpest scissors they could find, and did their best to copy styles they had seen in magazines or on television. The results were almost never what anyone hoped for, with chunks missing in odd places and layers that refused to blend no matter how much trimming followed. Kids sat still as long as they could, flinching when the cold metal brushed too close to their ears, hoping this time would somehow turn out better. Mirrors revealed the damage afterward, and there was nothing to do but wait for the hair to grow back while enduring comments at school. Some parents got better with practice, developing a signature style that every kid in the family eventually wore. Others never quite figured it out, leaving behind a trail of awkward photographs that would resurface at every family gathering for decades. Those kitchen haircuts were never about vanity. They were about saving the $5 or $10 a barber would charge, money that could feed the family for another day instead. Playing outside all day because there was nothing else became the default summer routine for kids whose families could not afford camps, vacations, or entertainment. In the 1980s, children left the house after breakfast and did not come back until the streetlights flickered on, filling the hours with invented games and neighborhood adventures. There were no video games waiting inside, No cable channels to flip through, no toys that required batteries or supervision. So kids made do with sticks, rocks, empty lots, and imaginations that stretched to fill every minute. They built forts from scrap wood, raced bikes down hills that seemed dangerously steep, and created entire worlds from nothing but boredom and creativity. Parents trusted the neighborhood to keep everyone safe, or at least safe enough, because staying inside all day was not an option when the house offered nothing but four walls and siblings who had already run out of things to say. Those long outdoor days built resilience, resourcefulness, and memories that still feel vivid decades later. It was poverty dressed as freedom, and most kids never realized the difference until they were grown. Stretching bar soap until it became paper thin was a bathroom habit born from necessity in homes where every product had to last as long as humanly possible. In the 1980s, families used the same bar until it cracked, split, and eventually dissolved into a sliver too small to hold. Parents pressed those final pieces onto new bars, hoping they would fuse together and buy a few more days before the next trip to the store. Kids learned to lather carefully, using just enough to get clean without wasting a single sud. The soap dish always held something worn down, edges rounded smooth from countless hands, color faded from weeks of use. Buying a fresh bar felt almost luxurious, a small upgrade that most families delayed as long as possible. Some households switched to the cheapest brands available, trading quality for quantity in a calculation that happened silently in every aisle of every store. That thin sliver of soap became a symbol of how far a family could stretch the smallest things when the budget demanded it. The habit stayed with people for life, a reflex that never fully disappeared even when money stopped being so tight. Extension cords running through every room became the makeshift wiring solution in homes where outlets were scarce and needs kept multiplying. In the 1980s, families plugged lamps, televisions, radios, and fans into long orange cords that snaked across floors, under rugs, and around furniture in ways that would horrify any electrician. The cords tangled together behind couches, created tripping hazards in hallways, and sometimes grew warm to the touch when too many devices pulled power at once. Parents knew it was not safe, but rewiring a house cost money that did not exist, and life demanded electricity whether the walls could handle it or not. Kids learned to step over cords without thinking, navigating the maze like it was simply part of the landscape. Sometimes the lights flickered when too much was plugged in at once, a warning everyone noticed but nobody could afford to fix. Those extension cords kept households running in ways that felt both clever and precarious, a temporary solution that somehow became permanent. The memory of tracing power from room to room, outlet to outlet, stays with people who grew up knowing that even electricity had to be stretched and shared. Church charity Christmas gifts wrapped by strangers arrived each December in homes where parents could not afford to fill the space beneath the tree. In the 1980s, families signed up quietly at church offices or community centers, answering questions about ages and sizes while trying not to feel the weight of needing help. The gifts came wrapped in paper chosen by volunteers, tagged with first names and guesses about what a child might want. Sometimes the presents matched perfectly. Sometimes they missed, offering toys for younger kids or clothes in sizes that would never fit. But the wrapping was always beautiful, and the effort behind each package was impossible to ignore. Kids opened those gifts on Christmas morning, knowing they came from somewhere outside the family, a truth that mixed gratitude with something harder to name. Parents watched with complicated expressions, relieved and heartbroken at the same time. Those charity gifts kept Christmas alive in homes that might have had nothing otherwise, a kindness delivered by people who never saw the faces that received it. The memory sits with people for life, shaping how they view generosity and the quiet dignity of accepting help. Collecting aluminum cans for deposit money was a childhood hustle that turned trash into pocket change in neighborhoods where allowances did not exist. In the 1980s, kids roamed streets and parking lots with plastic bags over their shoulders, scanning the ground for that familiar glint of crushed metal. Every can meant a few cents, and a full bag meant enough to buy candy or a comic book. Parents encouraged it, because the work taught lessons about effort and reward that lectures never could. Kids learned the best spots, the days when cans piled up, and the recycling centers that paid the highest rates. The bags grew heavy, hands got dirty, and the walk to cash them in felt like a small victory every time. Some kids saved for weeks, watching coins stack into dollars that felt like real wealth. Others spent immediately, savoring the freedom of buying something with money they had found themselves. That simple hustle stayed with people long after childhood ended, proof that resourcefulness could turn nothing into something when you were willing to look where others would not. Freezing Kool-Aid in ice cube trays for popsicles was a summer trick that turned a few cents worth of powder into treats that lasted all afternoon. In the 1980s, kids watched their parents mix the bright liquid, pour it into trays, and slide toothpicks into each cube before the freezer door closed. The wait felt endless, but the reward was worth it. Those homemade popsicles dripped down chins and stained fingers in colors that took days to fade. They were never as smooth as store-bought ones, often icy and uneven, but they tasted like summer anyway. Kids traded flavors with neighbors, argued over who got the last purple one, and learned to ration the tray so it lasted through the hottest weeks. Parents loved the trick because it cost almost nothing and kept children happy when there was no room for real ice cream. The simplicity carried a kind of magic, proof that joy did not require money. Those frozen cubes became symbols of making do, of finding sweetness in small places, and of summers spent stretching every resource as far as it could go. TV dinners as a special occasion meal turned aluminum trays into something worth celebrating in homes where eating out was never an option. In the 1980s, kids watched parents pull those compartmentalized trays from the freezer like prizes, sliding them into the oven with ceremony that made ordinary evenings extraordinary. The smell of heating Salisbury steak filled the kitchen, and everyone gathered around the television to eat something that felt almost like restaurant food. The portions were small, the vegetables always soggy, but none of that mattered when the meal came with permission to eat in front of the screen. It was a treat reserved for birthdays, for the end of a long week, for moments when parents wanted to give their children something different. Kids remembered which tray was their favorite, debated the merits of mashed potatoes versus corn, and cleaned every compartment without being told. Those foil-wrapped dinners carried more meaning than their price suggested, proof that celebration did not require expense, just intention, and a willingness to make ordinary things feel special. Newspaper, used for everything from cleaning to insulation, was the ultimate free resource in homes where nothing went to waste. In the 1980s, stacks of old papers sat in closets and garages, waiting to be torn or spread across surfaces that needed protection. Parents used them to wash windows, leaving glass streak-free in ways expensive sprays never matched. They stuffed them into wet shoes to dry overnight, packed them around fragile items during moves, and spread them beneath painting projects. In winter, some families tucked newspaper around drafty windows, adding insulation when proper materials cost too much. Kids used them for school projects and wrapping paper when gifts needed covering. The ink smudged fingers, but that was a small price for something so useful. Newspaper represented the philosophy of poverty, the idea that everything had a second purpose if you were creative enough to find it. That habit stayed with people for life, a reflex born from years of seeing value where others saw only trash. Tape holding eyeglasses together at the bridge was a visible repair that marked you before you even spoke. In the 1980s, kids with broken frames had few options when replacements cost more than the family could spare. So parents wrapped white medical tape or clear packing tape around the broken joint, creating a fix that held the lenses in place but announced the situation to everyone. The tape yellowed over time, peeled at the edges, and had to be replaced again as weeks turned into months. Kids pushed those glasses up constantly, felt them slip during class, and endured comments from classmates who noticed. Some tried to hide the tape with markers, but nothing ever fully worked. The repair was practical, necessary, and embarrassing all at once. It taught lessons about making do, about the gap between what you needed and what you could afford, and about how poverty sometimes left marks everyone could see. Those taped glasses became symbols of resilience, proof that function mattered more than appearance when survival demanded compromise. You could smell it before you opened the box. A big orange brick. No label, no brand, just cheese. It came from the government, which made it sound official, but it felt more like a secret. You stood in long lines at the community center or church basement to get it. People avoided eye contact. No one wanted to admit they were there for the same reason. When you got home, the block was heavy, dense, like a promise that this week might be okay. It did not melt like normal cheese. It clung to pans, stuck to knives, and burned if you looked at it wrong. But it was cheese. It worked. Grilled cheese, casseroles, sandwiches for school. It made plain bread feel like a meal. It didn't taste like comfort food, but it was comfort. And when things were really bad, even that brick felt like a small miracle. And for families that had little else, that was everything. The taste became familiar, then comforting, maybe even nostalgic. It was a flavor tied to both struggle and safety. You never forgot that box, or how it felt to need it. Couch forts were more than just living room playtime. They were architectural projects fueled by rivalry and imagination. If you had siblings, then you already know. It was not about building a fort. It was about building the best fort. Every couch cushion, every blanket, every kitchen chair was claimed like gold. Someone always stole the best corner cushion. Someone else took the throw pillows and declared them roof tiles. You would build side by side, trying to outdo each other, only to realize halfway through that you needed their help to finish. So you begrudgingly combined efforts, turned two forts into one, and named it something ridiculous like Castle Danger or Fort Potato. But peace never lasted long. Someone bumped aside. Someone took your flashlight. Someone knocked the whole thing over. And then came the tears. But in that fleeting window of truce, before the collapse, you felt like kings and queens of your tiny kingdom. Inside those blanket walls, you told stories, played games, and made up rules no parent could understand. It was all nonsense, but it felt important, because in that moment, the couch fort was yours. Showbiz Pizza Place was a sensory overload in the best possible way. Sticky floors, greasy pizza, that constant mechanical clunk-clunk from arcade machines, and of course, the Rock-a-Fire explosion. Animatronic animals with questionable wiring but unforgettable charm. You did not just eat there, you witnessed a show. Billy Bob, Mitzi, and the gang playing weirdly impressive covers of pop songs while you clutched your tokens like gold. The stage curtain would open, and kids froze like it was Broadway. You could barely hear the show over the buzz of arcade beeps and kids screaming with joy. Everyone had a favorite animatronic, and yes, we believed they were real. We danced in front of the stage like it was a concert, even though the bear's mouth barely moved. That pizza, greasy and amazing. And do not even get us started on the ball pit, a jungle of chaos and childhood dreams. There was something kind of creepy about it too, but we didn't care. We were hypnotized. The mix of food, games, and rock and roll robots was the recipe for childhood euphoria. It smelled like pizza and dreams. It felt like freedom and fun. And even when Chuck E. Cheese eventually took over, it never quite hit the same. Showbiz had that wild edge, that sense that anything, even a bear singing Elvis, could happen. You were not just carrying a cassette player. You were carrying a secret universe of sound, your own personal rebellion, slipped into your pocket between history class and gym. The Walkman was magic. Push play, and you were no longer in a school hallway. You were on stage, on tour, anywhere but here. Your favorite songs were loaded like weapons, tapes rewound to the best part, headphones hidden under your hoodie, the volume low enough to get away with it, high enough to drown out the boredom. But that illusion shattered the second a teacher noticed the wires. Hand it over. No warning, no sympathy. It went into the drawer, maybe for a week, maybe forever. They said it was a distraction, that it broke your focus. But really, it broke their control. The Walkman was the one thing they could not monitor. Your music, your mood, your identity, all locked behind those spongy little headphones. We weren't tuning out. We were tuning in to something that made us feel alive. It was escape. It was comfort. And when they took it away, it hurt more than just losing a gadget. Why was needing a little bit of joy seen as a threat? Step into a poor household in the 1980s, and you would be greeted by the warm, fake hug of wood paneling. It was always too dark, like a basement that forgot it was part of the house. The linoleum under your feet peeled at the edges, curling up like it was trying to escape. These design choices were not really choices at all. They were cheap, affordable, easy to install, easy to ignore. The paneling had that glossy finish that tried to look rich but felt more like cardboard wearing a tuxedo. It echoed every sound, too. Your footsteps, your fights, your late-night fridge raids. Linoleum was no better. It cracked under pressure, bubbled near the oven, and held onto dirt like it was saving it for later. It was home improvement without the improvement. But when you are poor, the only thing that really has to shine is your pride. You would drag a chair across the floor and it would scream with every inch. But it was all you had. Hardwood floors and tiled backsplashes lived in the glossy pages of Sears catalogs and the dreams of people who did not use Layaway. You made do. You told yourself it was cozy. You rearranged the furniture to hide the worst parts. A throw rug here, a makeshift mat there, and sometimes when the light hit it just right, it looked like something out of a real home. At least until the illusion faded again. Microwave pizza rolls and Tang were not just snacks, they were survival fuel. The moment school ended and the front door slammed behind you, it was a race to the microwave. Whoever got there first got the hotter pizza rolls. Whoever lost got the cold, chewy ones that always split in the middle. And if there were only a few left in the bag, forget it. That was the sibling version of a high-stakes negotiation. You would hear phrases like, "You got more yesterday," or "I saw you sneak extra last time," flying across the kitchen. Tang was no different. It was the drink of astronauts, or so the commercials told us, and it tasted like orange flavoring filtered through a sugar cloud. But it was ours. And if someone finished the last of it and left the empty container in the fridge, that was grounds for war. Every kitchen in the 1980s held these tiny battles. Behind every box of frozen snacks and every pitcher of Tang was a sibling dynamic teetering between love and petty betrayal. And somehow, despite the squabbling, there was comfort in it. Those microwave dings meant everything was still normal, still safe, still childhood. If you grew up in the 80s, Teddy Ruxpin was not just a toy. He was your friend. You did not just play with him. You listened to him, eyes moving, mouth sinking to the cassette in his back. Story time became something more, something kind of magical. He told you tales with that gentle voice and those blinking eyes that made it feel like he actually saw you, like you mattered. Kids would gather around him like he was a talking oracle with a fabric body and a beige plastic face. You would press that play button like it was a secret handshake. You never got tired of the same stories because Teddy made them feel brand new every time. His voice was calm, kind, and weirdly wise, like a bedtime librarian just for you. Some kids talked back to him, convinced he might answer if they just believed hard enough. And when the batteries started to fade and his voice got slow and creepy, we still could not let him go. He wore that tiny blue vest like he was ready for adventure at any moment. You would tuck him in next to you at night, hoping he might whisper one last bedtime story as you drifted off. He broke easily. Batteries died, cassette heads jammed, and eventually the mouth stopped moving. But somehow, even when broken, he still felt special. Like he had said something important, something just for you. The 80s had a way of making even robots feel full of heart. And no app today has ever looked a child in the eyes and told a story quite like Teddy did. The slap could be heard across the cafeteria. That crack of metal snapping around a wrist wasn't just a sound. It was a signal. You had one, and that made you someone. Slap bracelets were cheap, colorful, and slightly dangerous. Basically everything a good trend should be. They looked like harmless fun. But to school administrators, they were a liability waiting to happen. One rumor about a kid cutting themselves, and suddenly they were banned across districts. But we still wore them. We smuggled them in pencil cases, snapped them under desks, and wore them over sleeves like badges of resistance. They were not just bracelets. They were noisemakers, fashion statements, weapons in an imaginary war of cool versus control. You could trade them, color coordinate them, or just see how many you could wear at once without getting caught. Teachers confiscated them with the same intensity they used for actual disruptions. Why? Because they weren't in on the joke. They didn't understand how much one stupid piece of coiled metal meant to a kid trying to feel visible. It was never about the bracelet. It was about the thrill. When did having fun become a disciplinary issue? You did not sit on the couch. You sat on the plastic on the couch. Every sticky summer day, your thighs would peel off like cheese from a grilled sandwich. The covers squeaked, creaked, and groaned with every movement. It was not just a furniture choice, it was a financial strategy. That couch had to last. You could not afford a new one. Maybe it was handed down from someone who could, or picked up from a neighbor's sidewalk with a quiet prayer that it had not seen too much. But the plastic covers, they were a statement. A loud, crinkly one. They told guests, "This is all we have, and we are going to protect it like gold." You were not decorating. You were defending. That plastic was your insurance policy against time, kids, and chance. The air under the plastic was always warmer, damper, and just a little sad. If you were a kid, you hated it. But if you were a parent, you understood. The stains, the spills, the sharp corners of life, they had to bounce off something. The cover was armor for your dignity. Guests would pretend not to notice, but everyone knew what it meant. The plastic turned your living room into a museum. Look, but do not touch. Comfort took a back seat to preservation. You were not lounging. You were preserving history, one suffocating square foot at a time. Because replacing a couch was not an option. Covering it in shiny, suffocating plastic, that was survival. Having only one phone with a tangled cord might be the most underrated sibling fight starter of the decade. There it was, hanging on the kitchen wall like a museum piece, the cord wrapped and warped into knots that had been there since Reagan took office. Every sibling wanted it. Every call was urgent. If your crush was supposed to call, you would stand guard like a soldier. And when it rang, chaos. The sound of the phone ringing could set off a sprint down the hallway. Screams of, "I got it!" and "hang up" echoed through every house. And God help you if someone listened in from the other phone line. That was an unforgivable offense. You would whisper, "Get off the line," with teeth clenched like you were in a spy movie. Privacy was a dream. Call waiting? Not a thing. And when mom needed to use the phone to call Aunt Debbie about Sunday dinner, your entire teenage life crumbled in real time. That one phone was not just for communication. It was for drama, secrets, gossip, and endless fights over who was hogging it the longest. Peach Pit lip smackers were a middle school girl's rite of passage. Oversized tubes, crazy flavors, and a smell that hit you from 5 lockers down. If you had a lip smacker, you used it, constantly. On the bus, in class, at recess. It was less about hydration and more about the vibe. This was lip balm with personality. You were not just moisturizing, you were making a statement. You liked cherry cola or Dr. Pepper or wild raspberry. You were bold, fun.trendy. Some girls collected them like trophies, lining up a rainbow of tubes on their dresser. Sharing a flavor was basically the junior high version of a trust fall. And those tubes were indestructible. They survived backpacks, pockets, and the washing machine. They were conversation starters, trade bait, and tiny totems of tween power. Somehow, lip smackers made you feel grown up and silly at the same time. You might not have been allowed to wear makeup yet, but you could definitely rock some bubblegum gloss. The 80s understood that fun came in tubes the size of glue sticks. They weren't just toys. They were our cast of characters, our secret arsenal, our emotional support in plastic form. He-Man, G.I. Joe, Optimus Prime, tiny heroes that lived in our backpacks and pockets, pulled out during bathroom breaks or under the desk when the teacher wasn't looking. But when they did catch you, confiscated, scolded, sometimes even sent home with a note. Toys weren't allowed in the classroom. But no one bothered to ask why we brought them in the first place. It wasn't about defying rules. It was about survival. These figures were extensions of our identity, of the stories we were too shy or too bored to say out loud. They gave us power in a space where we had none. We staged epic battles under our breath during spelling tests. We gave them voices when our own felt too small. And we felt braver, funnier, stronger for it. But the adults only saw distraction, never creativity. They didn't understand that those tiny fists and molded capes helped us make sense of the world. Or maybe they did, and that's what scared them. Why did pretending make them so uncomfortable? If you had a television in the 1980s and it only showed black and white, it said something before you ever touched the dial. Those rabbit ears on top, bent, twisted, wrapped in foil like they had gone to war and lost. You would fidget with them for 15 minutes just to see a single clear frame. And God forbid someone walked across the room and knocked the signal out again. A family huddled around static, trying to catch the evening news or a rerun of Gilligan's Island in blurry gray. This was not just entertainment. It was an escape. A battered TV with no remote and a channel knob that clicked like it was trying to hold itself together was often the centerpiece of a living room you could barely afford to heat. The screen would hum with ghostly noise when no one was watching, filling the silence with electric whispers. This was your portal to a world that did not look like yours, and that mattered more than the fuzz on the screen. In those flickering black and white frames, you saw dreams dressed in Technicolor. And even with the black and white haze and those stubborn antennas, you clung to it. Because having cable meant luxury. Color television meant status. And if you were lucky, you could squint through the fuzz and pretend for just a moment that your living room looked like the ones you saw on screen. But deep down, you knew it did not. That screen was small, but the distance between your world and theirs felt endless. Do you remember what Saturday mornings felt like before adulthood ruined everything? If you had siblings, then you definitely remember the weekly war over the television. One of you wanted to watch He-Man, the other was obsessed with Thundercats, and someone always had to suffer through the Smurfs. This was not a minor disagreement. It was a full-on remote control standoff. No one cared who got there first. All that mattered was who could hold the remote the longest before Mom yelled at everyone to just pick something already. You would sit on the carpet, cereal in hand, desperately hoping your cartoon came on next. And if it did, you better believe you lorded it over your siblings like you were king of the living room. But the second it was over, you were back to arguing. Only this time, it was about what to watch next. These were not just cartoons. They were identity, loyalty, an entire battleground of taste and timing. And the real heartbreak? When the cable got fuzzy, the antenna would not work, or your baby sibling sat on the remote and changed the channel right at the best part. Looking back, it was chaos. But it was our chaos. Saturday morning cartoons and cereal were the holy grail of 80s childhood. No alarms, no school, just footy pajamas, sugary cereal, and a lineup of animated chaos. Your parents were still asleep, and for a few hours, the house belonged to you. Cartoons were not just shows. They were events. You had to watch live or miss out. No DVR, no streaming. You learned time management through Smurfs and gummy bears. Some kids made full schedules the night before, which shows to watch and which cereal to pour. We stared at that glowing TV like it was beaming in joy from another planet. There was no such thing as too early if it meant you got to see the intro to Thundercats. Sometimes you'd scream for someone to bring you more milk because you didn't want to miss a frame. And when it was over, it felt like the world slowed back down. You planned bathroom breaks around commercial clusters. The cereal box was entertainment too. Puzzles, games, even cut-out mail-in offers. Half the time it felt like you were eating sugar-flavored plastic. But we loved it. Marshmallow bits that turned milk into neon sludge. Crunch that could slice your gums. It did not matter. What mattered was the ritual. This was freedom. This was joy. The kind only a bowl of Cookie Crisp and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles could deliver. Kids today might binge entire series, but they will never know the adrenaline of racing to the couch before He-Man came on. They were banned, torn up, and labeled as a threat to the classroom. And yet, they were the one thing you never left home without. Garbage Pail Kids weren't just trading cards. They were proof that the world could be gross, chaotic, and hysterically unfair, and still make you laugh. With their snot-soaked puns, exploding heads, and wildly inappropriate names, these little stickers captured everything our parents tried to shield us from. That's exactly why we love them. We didn't just collect them, we smuggled them, traded them in secret like they were cash in a black market underworld. You were risking more than your recess. Kids got sent to the office, cards were confiscated, and some were even publicly destroyed by teachers trying to set an example. But no punishment could erase the rush of finding a rare one, or the thrill of a friend passing you atom bomb under the desk. These weren't just cards. They were a symbol of rebellion, humor, resistance, and ownership of something truly ours. When the adults freaked out, it only made them cooler. Because the truth was, they weren't scared of the cards. They were scared of what it meant when kids found power in something they didn't approve of. When did cardboard jokes become a revolution? You knew they were not yours. The clothes, they never fit right. The sleeves too long, the waist too tight, the colors faded like they had seen too many summers. But you wore them anyway, because new clothes were for birthdays, maybe Christmas, if you were lucky. Everything else was a gift from someone else's past. A cousin, an older sibling, a neighbor who outgrew it. Each outfit carried someone else's story stitched into the seams. Maybe you even remembered seeing them wear it, wondering how long until it became yours. And when it did, you felt equal parts lucky and ashamed. Kids at school noticed. They always noticed. The brands were outdated, the styles were wrong. You did not wear a fashion trend, you wore someone else's memories, and you walked through the day hoping no one recognized the past you were draped in. You walked a little faster, hoping no one would ask where you got it, or worse, who wore it before you. But still, your parents folded those clothes with pride, because hand-me-downs meant they were keeping you warm, dressed, and somewhat dignified without going broke. That mattered more than looking cool. You learned how to make old look new. You learned how to stretch. And somehow, you survived in second-hand fabric. Threadbare, but strong. They did not come with tags, but they came with a different kind of value. VHS tape wars were nothing short of legendary. Imagine coming home, excited to watch your taped episode of Knight Rider, only to find out your sibling recorded Alf over it. The betrayal was immediate and permanent. This was not just television, it was sacred archive. Rewinding and fast-forwarding became its own passive-aggressive sport. Someone always left the tape in the wrong place. Someone always hit record without checking. You learned pretty fast that labeling your tapes was a must, but even then, labels were ignored like suggestions on a Monopoly box. And the worst part? When someone taped over your tape with something dumb like a home video or their school play. The rage you felt in that moment still lives inside you somewhere. VHS tapes had a weight to them, literally and emotionally. They were black rectangles full of expectation, of rewatching your favorite scenes, of controlling time, just a little. But in a house with siblings, they were also landmines. A single mistake could ruin days of planning. And once a show was gone, it was gone. No streaming, no reruns, just a fuzzy blue screen and your sibling pretending they had no idea what happened. The Sears Wish Book was the one catalog that could make a child's heart skip a beat. That thing was thick, like 3 textbooks mashed into one, and it landed in your mailbox like a present before the presents. Kids did not just flip through it. We studied it, like archaeologists uncovering the secrets of the holiday season. The toys were always at the back, every page filled with dreams. Every kid had a strategy. Some went straight for the action figures, others flipped to dolls, and some scouted electronics like junior tech scouts. The glossy pages smelled like ink and promise. You could spot your wish list item a mile away and immediately scream, "This one!" at your parents. No one expected to get everything, but that never stopped us from circling 10 things on each page. It turned hope into a hobby. You circled what you wanted, starred the must-haves, maybe even folded pages like bookmarks of desire. You knew not everything would make it under the tree, but just the act of wishing felt powerful. The Sears Wish Book turned regular living rooms into boardrooms where kids made deals with Santa. Parents listened with poker faces while quietly budgeting in their heads. It wasn't just about getting gifts. It was about building anticipation, hope, and joy, one glossy page at a time. Kids would literally sleep with that thing under their pillow. Amazon might have the speed, but it never had that magic. Not like this. The Sears Wish Book was the ultimate Christmas hype machine, and flipping through it was the holiday spirit in paper form. You did not just wear parachute pants, you arrived in them. The swish-swish sound with every step announced your presence like a theme song. Bright colors, dozens of zippers, and sometimes even reflective panels, they were a walking protest against beige conformity. We saw them in music videos, on breakdancers, and in our wildest daydreams of being someone cool. Wearing them to school felt like crossing an invisible line. You knew you might get sent home, and that was part of the thrill. The rulebook said they were distracting or gang-related, but what they really meant was these pants gave kids confidence they were not supposed to have. You couldn't sit quietly and go unnoticed in parachute pants. That was the point. You became loud. Visually and literally, you became someone to look at. You were daring the world to try and tone you down. Some teachers rolled their eyes. Others wrote you up. But you didn't care. Because in those pants, you weren't just another student. You were a renegade. You were a performer. You were a billboard for your own identity. In a decade obsessed with appearances, you finally had something to say. Why was wearing confidence something to be punished? You knew they were not yours. The clothes, they never fit right. The sleeves too long, the waist too tight, the colors faded like they had seen too many summers. But you wore them anyway, because new clothes were for birthdays, maybe Christmas, if you were lucky. Everything else was a gift from someone else's past. A cousin, an older sibling, a neighbor who outgrew it. Each outfit carried someone else's story stitched into the seams. Maybe you even remembered seeing them wear it, wondering how long until it became yours. And when it did, you felt equal parts lucky and ashamed. Kids at school noticed. They always noticed. The brands were outdated, the styles were wrong. You did not wear a fashion trend, you wore someone else's memories, and you walked through the day hoping no one recognized the past you were draped in. You walked a little faster, hoping no one would ask where you got it, or worse, who wore it before you. But still, your parents folded those clothes with pride, because hand-me-downs meant they were keeping you warm, dressed, and somewhat dignified without going broke. That mattered more than looking cool. You learned how to make old look new. You learned how to stretch. And somehow, you survived in second-hand fabric. Threadbare, but strong. They did not come with tags, but they came with a different kind of value. Being Player One was not about gaming. It was about status. It meant control. It meant power. And in a house full of siblings, it meant everything. If you were the older sibling, you probably claimed it by birthright. If you were the younger one, you had to earn it through sheer persistence or sneakiness. There was no negotiation. There was only button mashing and shouting until someone gave in. Even the game itself treated Player One better. More lives, more responsibility, more glory. Player Two got stuck with Luigi, or Tails, or that weird second controller that barely worked. No one wanted to be Player Two. But when you finally got your chance to be number one, that was your moment. Until the game froze, or your sibling accidentally unplugged the console. But you always remembered who got to be Player One, and who had to wait their turn. There was a glow, a beat, and the smell of popcorn and sweat in the air. That could only mean one thing. It was time for a Bonnie Bell roller skating party. You laced up your rental skates, probably in some neon color, and hit the floor like you were entering Studio 54. Except, with more bruises. The disco ball spun, the lights blinked, and Madonna blasted from the speakers. There were couple skates, speed rounds, and the awkward moment someone fell and took out half the line. You tried to impress your crush without breaking an ankle. The Bonnie Bell reference? That was the cherry lip smacker girls wore, the scent that filled the rink and lingered in lockers for weeks. Boys smelled like bubblegum and sweat. Girls smelled like strawberry gloss and Aquanet. And everyone smelled like fun. You clutched your paper tickets like they were currency in a candy economy. And when your name got called over the loudspeaker for a prize, that was your rock star moment. There were prize tickets, nachos with nuclear cheese, and that one kid who could moonwalk in skates. Roller rinks were the social hubs of the 80s. You made friends. You made memories. And if you made it through without falling, you were a legend. You tore open the pouch like you were in the dugout, not the third row of math class. Big League Chew was shredded bubble gum in a pouch that looked way too much like chewing tobacco. And that was exactly why we loved it. It was gritty. It was bold. It made us feel like rebels in training. Stuffing a wad in your mouth, chomping with exaggerated confidence, you weren't just a kid chewing gum. You were an athlete, a rock star, a little outlaw with a sugar addiction. But the teachers? Oh, they hated it. They said it was messy, distracting, inappropriate. They didn't want to explain to concerned parents why their kids were pretending to chew tobacco. So they banned it. They made you spit it out. Sometimes they even called home. But they missed the point entirely. We weren't mimicking bad habits. We were playing a part, trying on the grown-up world for size. That was the whole thrill of the 1980s. We wanted to feel bigger than we were. And in that moment, blowing absurd bubbles with neon pink gum that looked like it belonged in a biker bar, we were. What was so threatening about pretend power? Heat in the 1980s was not something you escaped. It was something you endured. Poor meant you did not have central air. You had fans. One in the window that never really fit, another that oscillated like it was too tired to commit. You would lay still at night, drenched in sweat, praying for a breeze that never came. Ice trays became currency. Cold washcloths went on foreheads like war bandages. And opening the front door was not just about fresh air, it was survival. Kids played outside not because it was fun, but because it was cooler in the shade than it was inside. You kept the curtains closed, the lights off, and your patience thinner than your summer sheets. You were not just sweating, you were surviving. The summer heat became your constant, suffocating roommate. You might have visited someone who had air conditioning and wondered how they lived in such luxury. Cooled air, dry clothes, no noise but the gentle hum of comfort. Back at home, the sound was different. It was the buzz of old fans, the click of sweaty skin, the low groan of a family trying to pretend the heat was not a problem. You slept in front of that fan like it was a life raft, but it was not enough, and there was nothing you could do about it. If any of these memories brought you back to a kitchen, a lunchbox, or a moment you thought you had forgotten, share your story in the comments. Tap like if this felt familiar, and subscribe so you never miss the next trip into the past.